gonna go ahead and get us started. I'm so glad to get to talk to you about your book. It's so lovely to get to see you. It's like you talk via email for like literally
Mhm.
years, and then get to have like a discussion in person
Mhm.
slash Zoom, which is really great.
Mhm. Yeah.
I we've had so much excellent response to Sweetside Motel. I'm sure if it'll my Zoom will let me see, but there it is. I got it literally like 2 days ago. I was
Oh,
so excited. I was like, oh good, it came in time. And yeah, like the people, the readers who have gotten to read it so far early have really loved it. It's such a fantastic like example of like contemporary Gothic fiction, right? And so I'm really stoked that everyone has been loving it and that we've been getting so many good reviews. I got a review like I think it's in Italian like a few days ago, and I was like, wow, that's really cool. So yeah, it's reaching pretty far, which is exciting. Um,
yeah. I got tagged in someone's Instagram review today, and yeah, I'm not sure what language it is. I don't know if it's the same one that you saw. I don't think it's Italian. It maybe was some Eastern European language, and it was like, oh wow,
yeah,
I
so
can't
that's
read this, but
I
yeah, she
know.
seems to like it.
It's it's really interesting to see like that. I don't think I've had that happen before. So it's fun. Yeah, and yeah, and so I mean, Elaine, uh, who is our you write as E.L. Chen, you have had so much going on this year.
I know.
Like my condolences to your inbox. But I know that you have had so many projects that are coming out this year, books, and then you have such a storied history in short fiction. And so I'm really thrilled that we got to publish this little novella that um, I I've loved it, you know, from the beginning, obviously, but getting to work on it further and like go through the edits with it has been really lovely, and now to get to see the response, so it's just fantastic, and I'm so glad to have it, and delighted that I will be bringing physical copies to AWP this weekend.
Oh,
So
awesome.
I'll get to talk to people at the book fair about it, which is always fun. I love doing that.
Yeah.
But
No,
yeah,
I'm so grateful that you did publish the novel because novella. Because I think when I wrote it, I felt like I had leveled up from what I had written before. So it was really gratifying to get that acceptance. I was like
yeah,
absolutely thrilled.
it's amazing. I'm so glad to hear that. And that's such a great feeling. Yeah. Um, but yeah, I will stop babbling. And just say that we love your work and we can't wait to hear about things that you have coming. And we'll let you read for a little bit. I'll turn off my video and be quiet. And then we'll circle back.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to start from the very beginning. I'll read chapter one, which is very, very short, and then just the first scene of chapter two. So, Sweetside Motel, chapter one. Drive. Drive as fast as you can, as far as away as you can. Drive until horses and hay bales wink by on the side of the road instead of industrial plazas and big box malls. Drive until the only radio station you can reach on the dial crackles in French. Drive until you can't feel your fingers wrapped around the steering wheel, and when you wash your hands in the rest stop bathroom, you trace the faux leather stitches branded into your palms. Drive until the blood on your hooded sweatshirt dries, and you can pretend it was only a nosebleed. Drive even though it started to snow, and you never did put on your winter tires, because skidding across 2 lanes of highway at 100 kilometers an hour into the exposed bedrock of the Canadian Shield is better than anything waiting for you back in Toronto. Just drive until you can't anymore. Chapter 2. The car breaks down half an hour outside of Sweetside, literally. The sign at the side of Highway 11 taunts, Sweetside 50. Sarah pops the hood in its shadow and swipes wet clumps of snow off her eyelashes, setting the hatchback's steaming innards as if she knows what she's looking at. Craggy slopes of rock topped with snow-capped conifers press in from both sides of the road, compacting her anxiety into diamond-hard edges. She's a long way from Toronto's glass and steel and concrete. A tractor-trailer snarls past, shaking the little hatchback and sending Sarah stumbling from the highway's gravelly shoulder into the ditch. Stupid, stupid, she mutters, as she climbs back up, the near-frozen mud biting into the soles of her sneakers. Why did she think getting away would be easy? A black and white cruiser pulls up behind the hatchback and parks. Bile rises in the back of Sarah's throat. They can't have found her already. She buttons up the neck of her peacoat with cold-numbed fingers and flips up the collar to hide her stained hoodie. The officer who climbs out of the car is a tall, burly white man whose mask barely contains his graying beard. Sarah suddenly feels naked as the wind whips her bare cheeks. He looks her up and down. She guesses he's cataloging her surface traits. Her hair's severe black gloss, her skin extra pale and sallow from months spent indoors, and her eyes. It always comes down to the eyes. Ben once compared her to a Modigliani portrait, which wasn't the compliment he thought it was. "You are far from home, miss," the officer says, very loudly and slowly, having come to the usual conclusion. Sarah forces a smile. "I was on my way to see my brother in Timmins." She hopes the officer doesn't expect her to prove this. Graham isn't expecting her, and she's not sure if he'd welcome visitors during a pandemic. He blinks. "Can I see some ID?" he says, this time a little faster. "It's in the car." Sarah opens the passenger door of the hatchback with shaking hands, trying to remember everything her black friends ever told her about being pulled over by the cops. "I'm getting my wallet," she calls out over the hammering of her heart. The officer, thankfully, doesn't flinch when her hand disappears into the backpack on the front seat. Her fingers glance off the knife's crusty handle, and she hastily pushes it beneath her water bottle and change of clothes. She pulls out her wallet, places it on the roof of the car, and backs away. The officer opens the wallet, his eyebrows lifting at the amount of cash she's carrying. "Sarah, that's an unusual name." "Really?" "Well, for you, eh?" he says, and Sarah fights to keep the smile on her face. "Where are you from?" "Toronto." He sniffs. "That's just as bad." "As bad as what?" "You know," the officer says, and she does. "It's not a good time to go visiting." "My brother lives by himself, and so do I." He places the wallet back on the roof of the car. "I'll call you a tow truck." "Thank you." He looks her up and down again. "Don't thank me yet," he says, and unease shrinks her stomach into a knot. The officer ambles back to his car and sits inside, bringing a cell phone to his ear. Sarah scoops up her wallet and drops it in the backpack. The snow is either coming down heavier or blowing off the scraggly trees perched on the rocks. Sarah huddles on her hatchback's passenger seat against the numbing cold and dread. There's nothing she can do but wait for the outcome of a stranger's phone call. She continues to smile, in case the officer is watching. She feels smaller than she's ever felt before, dwarfed by the rock outcroppings and the gray highway that stretches on forever. When she'd started out, the highway had promised freedom. The unknown hadn't seemed as vast and scary. She'd been excited to see so many trees. Sometimes, as she drove, sunlight would catch on a creek or pond, a glittering oasis tucked in the woods. And then the trees would spring up again, and the water would disappear like a daydream. Just a lovely secret revealed to drivers who happen to glance out the passenger window at the right place and time. Now, standing still, the trees reveal nothing. The shaggy conifers cower under a veil of falling snow. The gray sky leaches the color out of everything, leaving only the grimy tint of salted slush splashed in the underskirts of her hatchback. The officer has been off his phone for a while, writing a tiny notebook. The blood roars in Sarah's ears, or maybe it's another truck rattling past. They'll be looking for her. And this officer will remember her. Of course he will. He won't remember her face, but he'll remember what she looks like, the box she ticks. A muddy tow truck materializes out of the falling snow and pulls up behind the police car. And the officer gets out to greet the driver. A rangy young white man bounds from the truck, his mask tucked under his chin. Sarah reluctantly climbs back out into the cold. The tow truck driver glances up at the sudden movement and yanks the mask up over his nose. Shit, he says, stepping back. Sarah's teeth grind behind her smile. Are you fucking kidding me, Isaac? She could have the virus. She's from Toronto, the officer says. Exactly. We can't leave the car on the side of the highway, Jerry. It's a traffic hazard. Fine, I'll take the car, but not her. Lars will probably quarantine it for a few days before he touches it. Panic surges in Sarah's chest like heartburn. A few days? Jerry blinks at her in surprise and then turns back to the officer. So she's going to need someplace to stay. I could call my brother, she starts. Timmins is almost 6 hours away, and it'll be dark soon, and you can't ask him to drive in this. The officer gestures at the flurrying snow, and Sarah's legs threaten to buckle, because he's right. She can't come to town, Jerry says, twitching like a rabbit. The inn's closed, and no one's doing Airbnb anymore. And even if they were, no one's going to take her. I haven't been anywhere but the grocery store for months, and I always mask up, Sarah says, struggling to keep her smile in place. I don't have COVID. Jerry spits on the gravel. We don't know that. Shit, you don't know that. Is there anywhere I can go? She asks, trying to keep dismay from cracking her polite surface. The officer shakes his head. Every place around here is closed. Though I could ask. He clicks his tongue. Jerry smirks. The Suicide Motel? The officer shoots him a look that could sear glass. My nephews run a motel just outside of town. They're closed too, but I could ask them to put you up. They had good reviews before it. He waves his hand, as if before is another place, like the city Sarah just left. You'll have to quarantine for 2 weeks before we let you in town to get your car. But my brother could pick me up tomorrow. The officer's eyes narrow above his mask. I don't know what it's like in Toronto. The name of her hometown comes out as a sneer, and she realizes with a sinking heart that being from the big bad city is another mark against her. But in Sweetside, we take the pandemic seriously. Half our seniors died, including my in-laws, and a bunch more folks are on ventilators in North Bay. So no one comes through unless they've got a clean bill of health. I hope you don't have anywhere to be. Sarah's face is starting to ache from smiling. No, not at all. And I will stop there. That's the end of the scene.
That's awesome. It's so lovely getting to hear you read it.
Yeah.
I never get tired of that. Thank you so much. I'm gonna let people um, unmute if they want to, but feel free to drop any questions in the chat, y'all. So yeah, I mean, I guess I want to start by talking about the book, obviously, and um, kind of how you came up with the idea. Um, like, I think at the time when I was first reading it, I had this feeling that maybe other people had of like, oh, a thing about the pandemic. Oh. But the book really twisted my expectations on that, and made it to where it it wasn't it didn't feel like reliving it in a negative way. Like I don't know how else to describe it, but it does this really fantastic job of managing that point in time to where it almost feels like a universal moment. Um, anyway, that's my observation, but I'm curious to know like kind of, how it came to be. Yeah.
Yeah, so initially, I guess I started out first with I had this idea kind of rattling around my head for a while of a woman being stranded in, a small town with two brothers who uh, tell her contradictory things about each other. And that initial idea, I also had the idea of like maybe there was a secret third brother who was actually a twin, and and that kind of thing. It would be a whole sort of intrigue. But I guess the trouble was that I could never really come up with a credible reason for why she'd be stranded someplace, especially, these days, everyone's got cell phones, there's cell coverage everywhere. There are very few like, super remote places anywhere in, I think, North America these days. Um, yeah, so that sort of half an idea had been rattling around in my head, and then surprise, pandemic, lockdown, and then I realized, oh, okay, so I could use that as a pretty good mechanism for stranding her someplace and putting her in the orbit of these two sort of very charming but slightly unnerving people. Um, and then, as you were saying about writing about the pandemic, I think for me that was sort of a challenge because I did write this in the middle of lockdown you know, while we were in lockdown, and I was conscious of, I was worried about, um, maybe being too hasty, but also, I was worried about naming the pandemic because I was worried it would also become very dated, um, as well. So, initially, I don't know if you remember the initial draft I sent to you, I actually don't name the pandemic at all. I just say, it's a pandemic, although, there's a familiarity to it that we all know, 6 feet of distance, masking up, quarantining for 2 weeks. So, I mean, I think that is, how I got around it at that point. But then I guess, we did actually end up naming it because, you were concerned that uh, people would get confused. And I think you're right that enough time has passed now that I think if people were reading about some pandemic where you have to quarantine for 2 weeks and, mask up and, keep 6 feet away from other people, then I think people would have been confused if I didn't actually name what it was.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Mhm.
also it felt like to me, because another huge part of the book is this like fear of the unknown, xenophobia, that is very specific to the character's experience and that time period. You know what I mean? Like, I think that felt important to me because it really happened, right? Like, and it's kind
Mhm.
of still happening in a way, right? Like, there was that aspect that I felt like, and it's funny because we even had a couple of, yeah, I try not to read the negative reviews, but we had one or two people that were like, I don't know if this is realistic. I'm like, I don't think you were reading the news. Like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that really did happen. Like that it really did engender this sort of like panic in some places. And that seemed important because it is like a reflection of that historical moment.
Yeah, no, this totally was me kind of processing this sudden, xenophobia against Asians. I mean, reading about nothing, I think, really dramatic happened in Toronto. Toronto's, extremely multicultural, and the neighborhood I'm in is actually, very Asian, right? So I was kind of,
Mhm.
thankfully in a safe little bubble. But yeah, no, reading about, people getting attacked in New York, and then there was um, that young man who shot up like a few like massage establishments. I can't remember where that was, but like
Yeah,
that's yeah, my worst nightmare. Um, and I don't I haven't read and I've been staying away from the reviews unless I get tagged in them.
sure.
So I haven't seen the negative reviews, but I'm wondering if maybe they're reacting to, they say it's like unrealistic. I wonder if they're reacting to sort of the very drastic measures that this town is taking to make
Yeah,
sure people stay in quarantine. But I mean, it's fiction, right? I mean, that's also
sure.
kind
Well,
of
and
part
like
of the.
maybe they don't live in an area where like I have experience with, I live in the United States South, and small towns are very xenophobic and they are very if they were kind of the opposite in that they kind of like tried to pretend the pandemic didn't happen, right? But I could easily see that happening in this rural setting, right? And so yeah, like we're talking about very slim number of people, maybe like one or two people, but yeah, like it struck me like, maybe they're just unfamiliar. Like I think a lot of people just probably like put their head in the sand and don't want to like kind of think about the uncomfortable things. And I like that this book really addresses it sort of head on, right? It through horror, which is such a great lens of looking at it. Yeah.
Yeah, I suspect that maybe also a lot of people just don't know what it's like to enter like a small town or a community and stand out in a way
Right.
that can't be disguised or masked in any way. Because I've had experiences of going into smaller communities, I guess, in Ontario, where, I felt safe. Like I didn't feel like I was targeted in any way, but looking around, especially coming from Toronto, which again is very multicultural, and realizing that, oh, I'm the only Asian person here. it's
Yeah.
it's a very unnerving experience to be like perceived that way,
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
suddenly be perceived.
Um, the other thing I love about the book is like the section you read, which is chapter one, which is just this like really short little like chapter, right? Um, it uses second person, and that um is returned to kind of again at the end, which I won't talk about too much to give it away. But I was curious that it feels like a little bit more experimental, and that was one of the reasons why I was drawn to the book. Is just that you're like kind of playing around with that, and I was curious like what you think about that and how you came to that specifically.
Yeah, so I have to confess that when I first wrote the book, my first drafts of the book was actually completely in second person.
Ah,
Um, yeah, just because, to try to put the reader, in the experience that
right,
the protagonist is having. Um, but then I ended up, but I did end up taking it out because I know that readers do kind of have mixed feelings about second person.
sure.
But when I was changing it back, I realized that, the first chapter and the last chapter worked really well. I think worked better actually in second person because I think there's like a certain urgency in it. And again, like placing the reader inside the character's head or inside the character's position. Um,
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like
I,
I
I,
love it. But
like
yeah,
it just made, yeah, but it just ended up making like really nice bookends, I think, for the story.
yeah, yeah, it gives it this sort of like, yeah, like I said, it's a little bit experimental in that you are switching the point of view, but there's also an interesting psychological distance, I think, that it creates in a way from like it does bring the reader in, but it also distances us in a way from that immediate perspective of the character in an interesting way. Anyway, that was my interpretation of it. But yeah, I love
Okay.
that about it.
Okay. Well, I'm glad it was effective because yeah, because I kind of felt like it, as I said, it made for a nice book ending.
Yeah,
So,
definitely. Um, and I think one of the references that comes up is the Psycho reference. Like, so here we have this character shows up at the Sweetside Motel, and it kind of has that like Psycho vibe. And I was curious whether that was like intentional or if there are other references that you had for the book.
I mean, that was totally intentional. I mean, I think as I was writing it, it's like, okay, I can't not mention Psycho just because, there is an old motel, but then there's like a house in the distance. I just, I had to make the reference to that. And also to kind of, I don't know, maybe put in a little bit of black humor, or just like kind of break the tension, which, um, at that moment. So
Mhm.
then,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, and I think the whole book sort of has like Hitchcock vibes in general. So.
yeah. And I think for me too, it sets you in the mood of that. Like one of the things I love about Psycho is I think it was one of the earliest kind of movies of like feminine horror, right? Like that final girl, but like she's not the final girl, right? But like that sort of like real close up horror of like women and how terrifying it can be to be a woman trying to exist in the world. And that you carry it forward even to today, like that is still a thing that exists for women. Um, yeah, there's some sort of like gender dynamic for me that feels like a reclamation of that storyline and
Mhm.
reference point.
Yeah, Psycho was very much like a woman in peril kind of
Yeah,
story, which is, even though it's kind of like a proto slasher, but at the same time, it is, I guess it also kind of fills that sort of gothic, the gothic criteria of, the woman in peril. It's in a strange remote place, where there's the unknown or someone that, can they be trusted or not? Um, their dark secrets and so on. Um, yeah, so it's sort of I think kind of does double duty in that way.
It seems like a genre that interests you because your other book is called Slasher Summer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. I know you
Yeah.
have like several forthcoming. But yeah, I noticed that that one, yeah, it's kind of got a little overlap there. And it's also like, it seems to be in retro conversation, right? Conversation with sort of like horror tropes in a really interesting
Hmm.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, slashers and gothics, I think, are probably my main occupations right now.
I love it. That's great. Yeah, I mean I really adore this book. It was a lot of fun getting to work on it. I think it does such a good job of managing the reader's expectations, and there's like fun little surprises, and also there's this sort of like romance vibe happening. Like, um, and what do you think about that? Is that like a thread that felt super important to you? Because it sounds like you started with the idea of these two brothers and them sort of like being unreliable. And I almost feel like in the end, the narrator gets kind of unreliable too, in sort of in a way. Yeah. So, yeah, I guess like I would love to hear you talk about sort of like that romance aspect of it.
Yeah, again, because I was sort of going by the Gothic model, right? There's always, someone attractive who, can they be trusted or not? So I was sort of following that, I guess, that pattern. But to me, I think of it as a Gothic romance, but a Gothic romance gone wrong because it is, the character does eventually, she kind of grows and she finds agency while she's, in this predicament. But she kind of transforms in kind of a warped way at the end. It's not quite, it's a happily ever after, but not quite a happily ever after. Um, I'm trying not
I
to
know.
spoil
It's
it
so hard not to
too
give
much.
away the
Yeah,
ending.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's like she finds herself, but you know, that that
Yeah.
self is maybe not morally a great place to be. That's yeah.
Yeah, I love that ending with again with the second person. Like it is so different and yeah, I don't know. It's like I want to talk about it, but I can't. But I don't want to give away too much. But it's definitely not an expected ending. And that's like a good, a takeaway that people have had that it's yeah, really just kind of a surprise and a strange, lovely ending. So yeah, so good work. Good job. Uh, if anyone else has any like questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or you can, speak up if you would like. I've unmuted for everyone. And yeah, I mean, I would love to hear about your other projects that you have going on, and hear what you have coming soon because I know you have so much work that you're working on.
Yeah, it's just been yeah, because I sold this novella to you, I think maybe a couple of years ago, and then just all of a sudden everything kind of
I
came
know.
at a head. Everything just sort of happened at once. So I've been extremely, extremely lucky. Um, oh, I see Alex has a question there. Can we get
Yeah,
this book and what format is it in?
yeah.
There is an ebook format. So I'm going to be, I think everyone here is like, I know, like they're my friends. Hello. Thank you for
Hi.
coming.
Well, thank you for
So,
coming.
so in Toronto, I am going to be at Little Ghosts Books, end of March, March
Ooh,
29th,
yay.
signing. So yeah, so if you want a physical copy, you can come to Little Ghosts
Yes.
and yeah, get one. So it will be in stock.
Yeah, we do try to do audiobooks. I've been sort of like looking at narrators and things, so that may be a thing that happens. They're difficult for us because they can be really costly, and for a small press it can be challenging. So and also I
Yeah.
just feel like we have to have the right narrator, particularly for this title. So we'll see if I find, the narrator that I like. I'll explore it. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And they would
but
have to be Asian too. So I need
yeah,
to kind of narrow. Yeah.
exactly. It's tricky, and so I've been looking at, I've had some narrations come in that are auditions, so we'll see if any of them seem to be a right fit. Yeah, but audiobooks can be tricky, but we do try to do them on most of our novellas when we can. Uh, yeah, and it's physical, and I dropped a link to it in the chat, and we have the ebook version. And we will be at AWP in Baltimore this upcoming weekend. And we generally are around at, like book fairs and things. I'm based in Texas, so Interstellar Flight Press does a lot of things in Texas. We're generally at Armadillo Con, which is in Austin, Texas. And I don't have any other major cons on my schedule this year, but we'll see. There's usually something that pops up. The AWP one, I happen to be tabling alongside SIFWA. So we're doing that. But yeah, good question. Um, oh yeah, we were going to tell us about your upcoming projects
Oh,
that you
yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the next book I have coming out in June is Slasher Summer, which is like the fun slasher romp. Tone's going to be a bit different from Sweetside
have.
Motel, um, but I think some of the themes I think will still be kind of the same because it really is. Because I did find myself, even though I set out to write like a fun slasher romp, it ended up being about identity at the end of the day. Anyway, it's
Yeah.
like the question I think that's been occupying me lately is like who gets to be themselves, right?
Mm.
And so with Slasher Summer, I had a lot of fun exploring all the different character tropes in slasher movies, like the cheerleader and the jock and the stoner and so on. So I had a lot of fun exploring those tropes, but also kind of subverting them as well. So that's coming up in June from Crown in North America and Michael Joseph in the UK.
Awesome. It has
Um,
a great cover too. I love the cover.
yeah, the cover is
So
just like
good.
just amazing. When I saw an early version of it, I was like, oh, it's at the
Yeah.
office, and it's like no one was around, so I couldn't show anyone. And it was just like
Yeah, it's great.
it's like
Yeah.
um yeah, and then I have another book coming out. The publication date's been pushed to next March with Orbit's horror imprint Run for It. And that is called One of Us is Already Dead. And that is I call it my midlife crisis horror novel. It's inspired by the Blair Witch Project.
Ooh.
And again, touching on, I guess, the final girl mythology.
Oh,
Yeah.
so it has like
So again,
found footage vibes.
I wouldn't say it's not written with like found footage,
Hmm.
with
Not strictly.
um yeah, but it's and it's inspired by the Blair Witch Project and the fact that the lead actress from that movie, Heather Donahue, who has since actually changed her name, the fact that she quit acting, right? That's
Mm.
actually what kind of inspired me
Yeah.
is that even though this movie was a huge hit, I don't think she went on to do a lot of acting work after that, and she ended up quitting. Um, and so, of course, that sort of sparks the idea. What if someone was in a found footage movie and they quit acting because not everything that had happened in the movie was staged?
Ah,
So that was
I love
that
it.
was the genesis for that film, or for that novel.
I love found footage. And yeah, you got to do some sort of weird online, like, the like promotion, because like I remember when that movie came out, and I remember going to the website. It was like very early days of internet. Like this movie had to be one of the earliest like online campaigns. So yeah, that's gonna be really cool. Yeah, I so like the last kind of question I want to ask you is just about sort of like writing. Like you're so good at this this style of writing, obviously horror, but also just like I have a sense that you're very good at like staying on top of your writing stuff and staying with your goals and like you're always like actively working on things. So like what advice do you have for writers that you know might be new or starting out?
Um, well, I guess the first of all, I think the only reason why I can stay on top of my goals is that I have no life. Um, pretty
Who
much,
needs that?
yeah.
Just writing,
Well,
right?
yeah, pretty much every hour I can spare, I put toward writing. I'm so behind on like TV watching and reading and playing video games, uh, and so on. Also, my home is a mess. I mean, right now you can only see this like tiny little window into our condo, but yeah, like the floor, there's stuff all over the floor. Sink full of dirty dishes. Bathrooms, I can't remember the last time I cleaned them. Um, yeah, but I think I guess advice for younger writers is that or anyone starting out is that you don't have to. I guess the key for me is that I put all the spare time I have toward writing, which isn't a lot. Maybe like an hour, maybe like an hour a day. But I think an hour a day is all you need. And I think when you're steady and consistent like that, you're less likely to burn out. Um, and I think a lot of people sign up for, NaNoWriMo or when NaNoWriMo was still around, and they put all their energy into trying to churn out, 50,000 words in 1 month. And then they never write again until the November rolls around next year because they're just all so burned out. So I think that for me, that, I would recommend the key is to just keep going slow and steady. And then they think that's the only way you can kind of stay sane, but also sort of stay on top of your goals.
Yeah, that's good advice. Don't burn out.
Yeah.
So hard. Hard when you can't control the deadlines. But yeah, I love it. Okay, well, that's kind of nearing the end. Elaine, thank you so much for writing the book and for sticking with us. And it's a long process, but we have a really awesome book, and I cannot wait to get to like see what people think about it and watch people interact with it. It's out in the world, and we really, really love having you at Interstellar Flight Press. I will say our next Zoom book launch that we're having will be in early April for a poetry collection. It's called Bury My Heart Under the Martian Sky by Juan Manuel Perez, who is a Mexican American Texan indigenous author based here near where I'm at, near Houston. He's in Corpus Christi. So we have that one coming out, and then we will be having one May and June. We have a busy spring ahead of us. But yeah, we love having these events. Thanks everyone for showing up, and thanks for being here. And we do record all of these. We put them on our YouTube. Sometimes it takes a little bit to get them up because we try to make the captions correct. So bear with us. But yeah, yeah, thanks for being here.
Right. So thank you for having me, and thanks everyone for coming.